Do you ever wonder about how fast and ferocious the rise of video games were back in the day?
What the hell? It's a goddamn cougar in the car!
Oh, there's a cougar in the car. I put it in there. You gotta learn to drive with the fear.
We're talking about going from Pong, where you had 2 sticks and a dot on a screen, to get some of the most immersive and graphic-intensive games we could get in the modern era. But even with the constant advancement of graphics, controls, along with the software and hardware updates that we've been getting, I feel like we're in the greatest free-for-all in all of video game history. And it's because of a dark and hidden truth that was really in everyone's face, but we couldn't see it till now. But before we can talk about the fall, we definitely need to talk about the rise. The rise of video games, especially in pop culture, can be up to debate when the rise truly was, but personally, I believe the rise of video games took place in the 90s. Being a child of the 90s myself, we got a radical wave of change with the continuing advancement of video game consoles in the 90s. I mean, we opened the 90s with the release of the Game Boy the year prior, and right on 1990, the Super Nintendo, which, mind you, the Super Nintendo was my first console ever when I was a kid, so, you know, it has a lot of sentimental value to me. But also, the 90s marched on like a party that just couldn't stop. We got the N64, the PS1, the Dreamcast. By the end of the 90s, we even got the Game Boy Color. We got our first taste of 3D in the 90s, and from there, it changed everything. Out from the floodgates, we were getting so many amazing classics that no one could keep up with the amount of games. Super Mario Kart, Earthworm Jim, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Pokemon, Sonic, Donkey Kong Country, and like a never-ending conga line, the games just kept coming and coming, giving a new passion and hobby to millions of people all around the world. An epidemic of gamers were upon us, and Google wasn't even a usable tool yet, and AOL was the main use of computers at the time. And if you thought anyone was getting a break once the 90s were over, you'd be wrong. Like the Kool-Aid Man breaking down a wall in a 90s commercial, we immediately got the PS2 in the year 2000. What came with such an upgrade in tech also meant more possibilities to blow my tiny boy mind. Pause. And you all could blow my mind right now by smacking that subscribe button, because it makes me happy knowing you want more, but more importantly, the PlayStation gave us such a revolutionary amount of titles like Shadow of the Colossus, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, and a billion other titles that absolutely filled every child's mind with the imagination that can conquer a universe. This is where the golden era of video games truly began. In a world where game devs had the chance to get bigger, better budgets, better graphics, but still were limited enough to have to be as creative as possible, we as a collection of gamers were able to see the might of the creative minds behind every video game that was made at the time. And while not every game in these times were a stroke of creative genius, we still got enough games that had such personality and creative solutions that we had an opportunity to see what could be made under the right conditions in a gaming studio. And the trend of great creative direction really rode the wave of success all the way into the 2010s. The PS3 got released, the Xbox 360, along with the GameCube and the Wii, all came along between 2000 and 2010. So much creativity just pouring out. We got so many revolutionary titles. I know, I use that word a lot. For people from Dark Souls to Uncharted, Assassin's Creed, to some of the most beloved Call of Duty titles, we got a wide and vast amount of games from as many genres as we could possibly fit into the narrative of this 10-year time slot. The gamer nation was becoming such a real thing that between the late 90s to the early 2000s, we made congregations for the unwashed, socially awkward masses, and it's had such an amazing events like E3, BlizzCon, and PAX be born for the sole purpose of teasing the next major releases, or getting to be a part of the midnight release events that GameStop would put on. The only one I ever got to go to was the Borderlands 2 one, and I even won some of those advertisement boxes that they would put around the store in a game raffle. But for conventions, they were also a place of worship and idolism for the voice actors and creators of all of our favorite titles. For a new subsect of species, basically, we got a safe space for them to graze like the cattle in the fields without the fear of the wolves to come near. But in all seriousness, the video game industry flourished in such a way that they were getting more and more ramped up. An industry to purely entertain people transformed into some of people's entire interests and integral parts of their lives. People have video game weddings from the effect that video games had on their life. It's easy to say that this era of gaming would shape people's whole sense of being based on the friends, connections, and lessons they would learn from this hobby. Not only that, but gaming also gave people their entire careers, starting off in 2012 with PewDiePie, all the way to today, where there are so many creators from YouTube and Twitch that are making their living today playing, reviewing, or talking about video games. It had become an industry so great that just making content talking about video games could change your life. But as the party was getting more excited, something dark was lurking just below. See, for game studios, it tended to start out with a small team of people, sometimes friends, sometimes just like-minded individuals that all had a spark of inspiration and creativity. But once a studio has a few hits under their belt and they start to see some real amount of dosh piling up in their bank accounts, then a dark essence starts to take control and they tend to make a fatal mistake. The company is either acquired or they go public. Damn you, capitalism! Now, let me preface this as saying not all companies that get acquired or go public go down a deep dark path, but nowadays it's more often to see the end result of being acquired or going public means that there's now too many cooks in the kitchen, if we're to say. And more importantly, the people in charge don't know anything about cooking and yet get to make decisions that will change how the food tastes. A great example of this in a recent release was Dragon Dogma 2. Besides some obvious issues that can be fixed with like the frame rates and things like that, the biggest complaint people have with the game is that it has microtransactions that completely fuck the story and character progression in a single-player RPG. Why would they ruin a perfectly good souffle by adding a fuck ton of salt? Well, because it wasn't the developers or the director's choice. Their parent company, Capcom, and all their infinite wisdom, thought on top of a $70 price tag that these one-time purchasable items would inflate the numbers on an Excel sheet the only people who don't make video games would care about. Because past the 2010s, the video game industry became a battleground. I'm not saying there wasn't any good games since 2010. That would be ludicrous. We've gotten some absolute gems that have come out in the last 14 years, but what I am saying is that a deadly disease has infested one of the biggest industries in the world, and it's not only taking away some of the creativity and passion, but it's taking away people's job in masses of recent times. And what is that infestation? It's greed. Now, that's an oversimplification of the issue. Let's get a little more specific. What's really happening is that the biggest group of people inside of a studio are typically the most creative, passionate, and hardworking people there is, and their one objective is to make you a game that will entertain you and provide you with a story. Then the smaller group of people who have most of the power in said studio are the least creative, most far removed from the process of being creative, and they have to answer to an even smaller or bigger group of people typically that not only have no creative bones in their body, but also only care if they get the most money possible out of the arrangement, even if it besmirches the studio in the process. And that is how we get things like what Capcom does, or what EA does, or any of the other big AAA studios in the industry nowadays. The industry is controlled by such profit margin over-the-shoulder overlord type that most big studios nowadays have to play it safe. Where the previous world of gaming was one where there was some greedy crapshoots, like whenever there was a tie-in game for a movie or a show that typically was awful, except for the SpongeBob games. Those were pretty tight. There was a huge point of making a game that is fun for the sake of being fun. With the current trajectory of games, we get a small showing of any real creativity and the ability to take chances that just get several iterations of almost the same game most of the time. Sure, we get small tweaks here and there, but where is the big brave step making something that might fail? Failure is a lesson on how to make something better the next time, but with expectations that every game needs to make millions upon millions a year, if devs fail even once, then there's a big chance that there will be layoffs, even if the company is flush with cash. I mean, look at this year. We lost so much of the industry out of nowhere. People were making record margins for some companies, and we're talking in the billions. And yet so many game studios laid off so much talent that they can no longer get back some of the talent that's been there for years. Truthfully, that's why within the ashes of the big gaming industry, the indie market is soaring even higher this year. It's the people who love games getting to decide to make something new and interesting and be allowed to fail if an idea doesn't work. Whether you're team Palworld or not, Palworld was fun for a lot of people when it came out. Same thing with Enshrouded, another game that showed the power and potential of voxel environments. We also had like Cuphead, Hades, Dead Cells, Stardew Valley, Rust. So many other amazing titles show us that a game doesn't need a huge budget to make an amazing and involved world, even in the modern age. It's why the work of streamers like Pirate Software is really important. With this industry so muddied right now, it's more important than ever to protect and nurture new developers and game creators. Because without new people starting to make their passions a reality, all we would have left is hoping that between all the corporate manhandling, we would get something interesting and new from studios making billions off of making the same shit every few years. Pokemon. Honestly, I don't want to end this video being a Debbie Downer, so do I think there's another rise for video games? Yes, absolutely. It's an industry with an ebb and flow just like any other industry. We may be currently at the bottom of the wave, but we will get back up to a peak. It may be that the increasing cost of games from big studios drive people to the indie market, while more and more interesting devs will have a shot of impressing us with something truly dazzling. Or there's always a possibility that game studios will take their lackluster content and price gouging too far, and the consumer will finally fight back against it. I mean, it's totally possible, since while humans are creatures of habit, we all as a collective do finally fight back when the beehive has finally been kicked hard enough. Though, I have a personal hope that just all the amazing devs and creatives that have lost their jobs or have a good idea get to make those ideas a reality. Gaming will never die. It will continue to move forward forever, so I just have high hopes that the future looks like a new innovative idea and not something that we don't get to love, something that's just a cash grab. At the end of the day, I just want the people inside the industry to be able to make actual games they can say they put their best efforts into. And I want consumers to have games that they can truly love from the bottom of their heart. I want to be able to see the future of games be one where kids get to experience the same purest of joys that I got when I was a kid, playing all the games that were amazing in the 2000s and the 90s. If you remember that one game that really molded your childhood, then I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, then click on another one right over here. And until next week, I'll be seeing you.